Decoding before writing. Pillar. Work, rival/enemy romance. But the airport mechanic introduces a deadline the framework rarely uses. This isn't a slow burn revelation in a familiar space. This is a ticking clock. The plane boards. The confession happens or it doesn't, and then it's over. Hook type. Type A, premature reveal, maximum pressure. The grab and the line land in the hook. The entire script is the explanation of how two people who competed for years ended up at a departure gate with one of them holding the other's hand and meaning every word of it. The structural problem this title creates. Airport confession scenes have a grammar the audience already knows. The framework's job is to earn the specificity underneath the familiar shape. Why this rival? Why this airport? Why this moment and not any of the 100 moments before it? If the script doesn't answer those questions with precision, it collapses into sentiment. Every beat has to be doing double work, building the story and justifying the ending. The deeper structural problem, he's leaving. This isn't a confession that opens something. It's a confession that arrives at the last possible moment before it becomes impossible. Which means the script has to carry the weight of why he almost left without knowing, and why she almost let him. Inciting event. The job offer is the engine. He's accepted a position abroad, 2 years, significant career move, decided and announced and real. The rivalry has been the structure of the past 3 years. With him gone, that structure collapses, and she realizes, too late almost, that the structure was never about the work. Her signature prop, something she gave him professionally, a marked-up report, a specific document, something that passed between them in the context of competition and now means something else. I'll use a project brief she annotated and slid across a desk at him in their first real confrontation. He kept it. She finds out he kept it. That's the emotional detonation in the revelation spiral. Confession shape. She grabs his hand. She goes first, physically, which is the bravest move in the framework. But she speaks in halves. He has to finish it for her. The final true thing is his. The last honest line before the decision. The decision, the framework never explains whether he gets on the plane. The ending is the choice being made together, not the logistics of it. What matters is that he stays, or that she asks him to, and that both of them know what that means. Tone. This one is the most urgent of all 6. The dry wit still fires, but it's tighter, more compressed. There's a clock running, and the MC knows it. The pacing in beat 4 accelerates differently than the other scripts. The sentences get shorter as the gate approaches. She grabbed my hand at the departure gate, and I stopped walking. And she said, "Don't get on that plane. Please don't go." I had gate B14 behind me and 3 years of competing with Nora Venn in front of me, and my boarding pass in my hand, and the very specific paralysis of a person whose understanding of a situation has just been completely revised at the worst possible moment. I said, "Nora?" She said, "I know. I know the timing is. I know. Just..." Her hand tightened once around mine. "Don't go." I missed my flight. I would like to say I thought about it. I did not think about it. She said, "Please," and I put the boarding pass in my jacket pocket, and that was the end of my considered decision-making process. I have not recovered my reputation for good judgment since. I am not trying to. My name is Marcus Adeyemi. I'm 36. I work in strategic development for a consultancy that advises on large-scale infrastructure projects. I find where the gaps are between what exists and what's needed, and I make the case for bridging them, which is either very useful work or a very elaborate justification for arguing, depending on your perspective. I live in London. For 3 more days, I had lived in London. I had been moving to Zurich, a 2-year secondment to a firm that had offered me the kind of project scope I'd spent a decade working toward. The flat was already sublet. The boxes were already shipped. The flight was the last piece. I had worked at Caldwell Associates for 3 years. Nora Venn had worked there for 4. She ran the infrastructure strategy team. I ran the policy development team. We operated in parallel on every major project in a way that required constant coordination and produced, reliably, the best work either of us had done, and the most adversarial professional relationship I had ever had the misfortune to find productive. She was 34. She had the particular quality of someone who had decided very early to be excellent and had not reconsidered that decision since. She argued precisely, without cruelty and without yielding. She read everything. She remembered everything she read. She had the kind of mind that found the structural flaw in an argument before the argument had finished stating itself. And she deployed this skill without mercy in meetings and with complete absence of ego afterward, which was the most disorienting combination I had encountered professionally. She also had, from the first week, a specific and highly personal approach to disagreeing with me. Not hostile, not dismissive. She disagreed with me the way you disagree with someone whose opinion you find genuinely interesting to argue with. Which is worse, I have come to understand, than dismissiveness. Dismissiveness you can maintain distance from. Finding someone's opposition interesting is the beginning of something you cannot take back. We had met properly over a project brief for the Hartley Cross development, a contested regeneration project that both teams had been tasked to assess from different angles. She had come to my desk on a Wednesday in September of my first month, put a marked-up copy of my draft brief on the desk between us, and said, "Page 11. Your traffic modeling is using pre-pandemic baseline data. It invalidates the access impact assessment." She had not said it unkindly. She had said it the way you tell someone their coat is on inside out, plainly, because fixing it was the obvious thing. I had looked at page 11. She had been right. I had kept the brief. Not consciously, not at first. It had gone into a file, and the file had stayed in my desk. And 3 years later, it was still there, and I had never examined why. The leaving drinks had been on Friday night, which was 3 days before the flight. The office had done the thing offices do: speeches, a gift, the particular warmth of people who like you more than they say in ordinary circumstances. My manager said things about the work. People from other teams came by. Nora had been there. She had arrived in the second hour, which was late enough to be deliberate, and she had stood at the edge of the group when my manager was speaking with an expression I had not been able to read. After the speech, she had come to find me at the bar, and she had handed me a drink and said, "The Zurich team are very lucky." I said, "That's the nicest thing you've said to me in 3 years." She said, "I've said nicer things." "Name one." She thought about it. "I told the steering committee your proposed routing for the Ashfield bypass was the strongest option on the table. You also told them my costings were optimistic. They were optimistic. They were aspirational. Marcus." The way she said my name in that register, level, almost fond. The register that meant she was done arguing a point because the point was settled. They were optimistic, and the project came in 4% over, and you know it. 4% is within the acceptable margin. For whom? I had not been able to stop smiling. This was the problem with Nora Venn. She argued with me about cost overruns at my leaving drinks, and I could not stop smiling about it. This was not the behavior of a person who was going to be fine in Zurich. She had left before midnight without saying goodbye, which I had told myself was because she had an early start and not because goodbyes were a thing she was avoiding. I had told myself this with moderate conviction. Saturday, I finished the flat. Sunday, I had lunch with my sister, who said, "You seem strange." And I said I was just tired. And she looked at me with the expression of someone who has known you your entire life and is deciding whether to spend the energy on the argument. She decided to spend it. "You seem strange in the way you seem when something is wrong that you haven't said out loud yet." "I'm moving to Zurich. There's a lot to manage." "I know you. This isn't logistics strange." She put her fork down. "Is it work? Is it that woman you argue with?" "I don't argue with anyone." "The one you've mentioned approximately 9,000 times in 3 years. The one who is apparently wrong about infrastructure methodology and right about it simultaneously depending on the week." I looked at my food. "Nora is a colleague." Marcus. "She's a colleague and a professional." Marcus. My sister said it in the specific way that meant I was embarrassing myself, and she was fond of me anyway. "You've mentioned her in the context of 17 different conversations over 3 years, none of which were about her. She just appeared, in conversations about other things." She picked up her fork. "That's not colleague territory. That's somewhere else." I said nothing. She said, "Okay, go to Zurich." She said it without judgment. Just the statement of a person who had laid out what she could see and was leaving the rest to me. I thought about it that night. That is not entirely accurate. I had been thinking about it in pieces for longer than I was willing to admit. And Sunday night was the first time I let myself think about all the pieces together. I thought about 3 years of the most productive professional opposition I had experienced, and what it meant that productive was not the right word for it, had never been the right word for it. I thought about the brief in my desk drawer. I thought about my leaving drinks, and the Zurich team are very lucky, and the way she had left before midnight. I thought about the fact that I was moving to Zurich in 36 hours, and she and I had never once, in 3 years, said anything that wasn't professionally adjacent. I put the thought away. The boxes were shipped. The flat was sublet. The decision was made. I went to the airport. I was at the gate with 20 minutes to boarding when my phone rang. It was Jamie from the office. Jamie who had, I was now realizing, been in the same pub on Friday night as Nora, who had seen us at the bar, who was not a person known for minding his business. He said, "Mate, I'm just checking you're at the airport," in the tone of a man who knew exactly where I was and was confirming it for reasons of his own. I said, "I'm at the gate." "Right," he said. "Right. So, how long does it take to get from the car park to gate B14? I looked up from my boarding pass. "Why? Just, roughly, in your experience." "Jamie." 7 minutes, he said. "I'm told 7 minutes if you move fast, possibly 6. He hung up. I looked at the gate. I looked at the departures board. I looked at the middle distance in the way I had apparently been doing when I processed things, a habit I had not known about myself until recently. I did not move. 4 minutes later, she was there. Nora Venn in her coat, slightly out of breath, with the expression of a person who has made a decision at speed and has not yet caught up with having made it. She stopped when she saw me. We looked at each other across the gate's waiting area, and then she walked toward me, and she reached out and took my hand, the way you take hold of something you are not willing to watch leave, and she said it. "Don't get on that plane. Please don't go." We sat in the row of seats at the gate for a long time after the plane left without me. Not talking, not immediately. We sat with the fact of it, the gate emptying around us, the departures board flipping to the next flight. Then she said, "I found out the brief was still in your desk." I looked at her. "Rachel was clearing out your drawers on Friday, putting things in the box for the removal, and she mentioned it. The Hartley cross draft. She said it had your name on it and mine, and she didn't know if you wanted it or if it was mine." Nora looked at her hands. "I said it was mine. I took it home. I thought about the brief. 3 years in my desk. Not filed, kept. Kept in the way you keep things you don't want to examine too closely." "You kept it," she said. 3 years. "I don't know why," I said. Then, "I know why." "Tell me." I looked at her. Nora, who had come to my desk in the first month and been right about page 11, who had argued with me about cost overruns at my leaving drinks, who had found my opposition interesting for 3 years in the way that was not professional and had never been professional. "You put that brief on my desk on a Wednesday and told me I was wrong. And you weren't unkind about it, and you were completely right, and I thought this is a person I want to keep arguing with. For a long time." I stopped. The brief stayed because it was the beginning of that. I didn't want to let it go. She was quiet. "I should have said something," I said. "Before now. Before the boxes and the sublet and the—" "I should have said something," she said. "Years ago. I kept not saying it because saying it meant risking. We worked well, Marcus. We worked better than I've worked with anyone. And I was afraid that saying what it actually was would change the work, or you'd leave. And I'd rather have the work than—" She stopped. "And then you left anyway." "I almost left." "You almost left," she agreed. She looked at me properly, without the professional register, without the management. Just her. "I don't know what I'm asking. I know you have a flat in Zurich from Thursday and a project that starts next week, and I know I have no right to." "Nora." I said it the way she said my name. Level, final. The way you say something when the argument is over because the point is settled. "You came to an airport." I did. "You ran through a car park." I did not run. A beat. I walked very quickly. "You held my hand and said please." She looked at her hands. Outside the windows, another plane was moving on the tarmac, slow and certain. "I was so tired," she said quietly. "I was so tired of knowing what it was and not saying it. 3 years of not saying it. And then you were leaving, and I thought, if I let you get on that plane, I will spend the rest of my life knowing I let you get on that plane." I thought about my sister, about the 9,000 conversations Nora had appeared in, about the brief in the drawer. "The project doesn't start until Monday," I said. She looked up. "The flat is available from Thursday. I have 3 days." I looked at her. "I have a great deal to think about and some calls to make, and a secondment that may be negotiable in its terms. I don't know yet. I don't know any of that yet." I reached over and took her hand back. Properly this time. Not the desperate grip of a departure gate, but deliberately, the way you take hold of something you're choosing. "But I have 3 days. And I am not spending them not saying it." She looked at our hands, then at me. Something in her face settled, not relief exactly. More like resolution, like a structural argument that had finally found its load-bearing answer. "I've been right about infrastructure methodology every single time," she said. "You've been right about the methodology. The costings are still a live debate." "The costings are a live debate," I said, "which I am very much looking forward to continuing." She laughed. It arrived without warning and changed the gate's waiting area entirely. And I thought about how many times in 3 years I had made her laugh like that and told myself it was professional satisfaction. I had been very committed to telling myself things. We sat in the emptied gate with the departures board running above us and her hand in mine. And I did not look at what came next. What came next was calls and logistics and a conversation with Zurich that I did not know the outcome of. And all of that was real and waiting. But it was not here. Here was a gate and a missed flight and 3 years of a thing that had been called opposition and was something else. "The brief," I said after a while. "What about it? Can I have it back?" She considered this with the seriousness she gave to everything. "No," she said. "It has my name on it. It has my annotations." She looked out at the tarmac. "I'll keep it somewhere neither of us can lose it." I didn't argue. She was right. She was, as previously established, right with reliable consistency. And I had spent 3 years finding this the most interesting thing about her. I was not going to stop finding it interesting now. The secondment was renegotiated. Not canceled, delayed, restructured, made into something that could work differently. This took 3 weeks of calls and some uncomfortable conversations and one very long night where it looked like it might not be possible. And then it was possible. The Zurich project became a 6-month engagement, consultative, with the option to extend. The flat became a sublet that ran on schedule and then became a short let for visits. These are logistics. They are not the point. The point is this. She kept the brief. It went on her shelf, between 2 planning references she used every week, which meant it was neither archived nor displayed. It was just there, in the working part of her life, which I understood was its proper place. 8 months later, I was at her desk reading something she'd sent me when I noticed it. She was on a call across the room. I looked at it for a moment. The marked-up pages, the page 11 note, the beginning of something that had taken 3 years and an airport to name. And I thought about how long it had sat in my drawer and what that meant and what this meant. And I thought they meant the same thing. That some things stay because they're load-bearing. That you can know that before you can say it. She finished the call. She looked over and saw me looking at the brief, and she said nothing. Just held my gaze for a moment with the expression she had when the argument was over because the point was settled. Years later, when people asked what had finally done it, what had made her run to the airport, what had made him miss the flight, she said she didn't know. That she'd been standing in the car park and her feet had just carried her. I said it was the brief. That it was always the brief. That somewhere between page 11 and a departure gate, knowing someone had kept the beginning of something, told you they hadn't been ready to let go of the rest of it either. She said that was a very architectural way to describe falling in love. I said I worked in infrastructure. Structures were how I understood things. She said 4% over was still 4% over. I said she was never going to let that go. She said, correctly. What would you have done if someone grabbed your hand at the last possible moment and part of you had been waiting for them to? And have you ever kept something small from the beginning of something without letting yourself look at why? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.